Dust rises from the chalky road on the Mount of Olives. Palm fronds slap against the packed dirt. The crowd is screaming his name. The political tension is electric. And Jesus breaks. He does not smile. He does not wave. The sound rolls down the Kidron Valley. It bounces off the massive eastern wall of the city. Thousands of voices screaming the ancient coronation anthem of Psalm 118. Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. The Pharisees push through the throngs. They are panicking. Their robes are covered in chalky dust. The noise is deafening. The Roman garrison at the Antonia fortress is watching from the high towers. Hands on their swords. A riot could break out at any second. The Pharisees yell at Jesus over the roar of the crowd. Teacher, rebuke your disciples. Tell them to stop. Tell them to go home. Shut this down. Jesus looks back at the religious leaders. He refuses. I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out. This is not a preacher losing control of a mob. It is a sovereign executing a deadline. For 3 years, he hid his identity. For 3 years, he commanded silence. Now, he accepts the shouts. The clock has struck 0. Gabriel's countdown is finished. Mashiach, Nagid Messiah, the commander, is riding into his capital. He crosses the valley floor. The white marble of the temple gleams blind in the midday sun. The golden plates on the sanctuary roof catch the light. The massive stone gates loom ahead. The mathematical precision is staggering. The prophetic alignment is flawless. He has arrived exactly when Daniel's scroll said he would, down to the very rotation of the earth. He looks at the city and he begins to weep. And the Greek text indicates this is not a quiet tear rolling down a cheek, but as the city comes into full view, the triumph fractures. The donkey stops. The chanting fades into background noise. Jesus stares at the walls of Jerusalem. His chest heaves. The deep, violent sobbing begins. He looks at the religious elite, the scribes, the men who know the scrolls of Daniel by heart, the men who should have been standing at the gates, checking their watches, and he uses one devastating Greek word to name exactly what they just missed. Look at the exact phrase Jesus uses through his tears in Luke chapter 19. He looks down at the sprawling stone architecture of Jerusalem, and he pronounces a devastating judgment. He tells the city it will be leveled to the ground, its children crushed in the rubble, the temple dismantled stone by massive stone. For one specific reason, because you did not know the time of your visitation. The word translated as visitation in English sounds harmless. It sounds like a polite drop-in. It paints the picture of a neighbor knocking on your heavy wooden door with a basket of fresh bread, or a relative stopping by to say hello. But the word Luke records on the parchment is the Greek noun episkope. It comes from 2 root words. Epi, meaning over or upon, and scopio, meaning to look, to examine, to scrutinize intently. In the 1st century Roman world, an episcope was not a casual event. It was the official arrival of an inspector. It is a deep, loud, convulsive sobbing. This is not a man overwhelmed by the adoration of a crowd. It is the moment an auditor walks into the room and demands to see the heavy leather ledgers. It is the hour a military general walks down the line of standing soldiers, inspecting the sharpness of the iron, looking for rust on the blades. An episcope is not a social call. It is a divine audit. When Jesus uses this word, he is invoking the terrifying weight of an official. Scheduled inspection. Gabriel handed Daniel the spreadsheet in Babylon. The math was public. The scroll was sitting in the very temple Jesus is staring at, carefully wrapped in fine linen, preserved by men whose entire vocation was to study the text. They had the numbers. They had the dates. They had Zechariah's explicit prophecy about the unridden colt. They had all the pieces of the puzzle sitting in their laps. But they missed the episcope. They were so consumed by the political tension of the moment, so obsessed with maintaining their fragile truce with Rome, that they missed the arrival of the inspector himself. Jesus is not sobbing because they failed to be spiritual enough on a Sunday afternoon. He is sobbing because The exact hour of their deliverance arrived. And instead of opening the gates to the commander, they are standing in the chalky dust, telling him to keep his followers quiet. They held the prophetic calendar in their hands, and they completely missed the clock. It is a king mourning a people who have missed an appointment. Through the sobbing, he speaks to the city below. But the detail that makes this historical tragedy so haunting is not just what happened to Jerusalem, it is what happens when the timeline shifts forward. What happens when we sit on the other side of the cross, holding a Bible full of fulfilled mathematics, and we make the exact same mistake? You are not standing on a dusty road in the first century. You are not wearing a rough woven cloak. You are gripping a steering wheel, not a palm branch. You are breathing air-conditioned air, not the blazing heat of a Judean spring. But you hold the exact same text. You possess the same prophetic timeline. You see the completed math. You know the exact day the commander rode down the mountain. And yet, the tragedy repeats. We miss the visitation. How does it happen? How do you hold the blueprint in your hands and still fail the inspection? It happens exactly the way it happened to the men in Jerusalem. You get distracted by the noise. You obsess over the empire. You worry about the heavy iron boots of whatever authority is currently pressing down on your life. Your chest tightens over the news cycle, the bank account, the chaos in your home. Missing the arrival is not a failure of intelligence. If you, even you, he had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. It is a failure of attention. You want a king to fix your immediate, temporary problems. You want a sovereign who will march into your specific crisis and overthrow the Romans in your life. You want an immediate end to the discomfort. You demand a political victory. God sends a lamb. You demand an iron sword. He brings a stopwatch. You demand a loud, instantaneous revolution. He brings a quiet, agonizing transformation. When he does not operate on your schedule, you panic. When he does not overthrow the obstacles you want destroyed, you try to shut down the disruption. You try to manage the optics. You try to keep everything quiet. You want a religion that fits neatly into your weekend, not an inspector who walks into the deepest, hidden rooms of your life and demands to see the ledgers. You stand in the chalky dust of your own life, overwhelmed by the noise, and you miss the inspector entirely. The clock ticks in the quiet moments. It ticks in the fluorescent light of the hospital waiting room. It ticks in the silent house after the shouting stops. He arrives for the episcope in the exact places you are trying to escape. Jesus wept over Jerusalem because they did not recognize the time of their visitation. Notice the phrasing. He does not say, "in this season." He does not say, "in this generation." He says, "on this day." But those tears echo through the centuries. They fall over every life that is too busy looking for a worldly king to recognize the arrival of the actual sovereign. But there is a detail hiding in the dirt of that ancient road. And the part that makes this remarkable is what Jesus says happens if the people refuse to speak. Look at the ground under the donkey's hooves. The Mount of Olives is covered in white limestone. Hard, jagged rocks, baked white by the relentless Mediterranean sun. For centuries, these stones have sat in absolute silence, absorbing the heat, covered in the fine, chalky dust kicked up by generations of travelers. When the Pharisees demand that the disciples shut their mouths, they are demanding that the timeline be paused. They want the noise to stop, so their fragile political ecosystem can survive another day. Jesus refuses. He points to the limestone scattered across the dirt. I tell you, if these were silent, the very stones would cry out. Most people read this as poetic hyperbole, a creative way for a preacher to say his followers are really excited. But Jesus is not speaking in metaphors. Jesus is not employing a clever rhetorical device. He is stating a literal, creational fact. To the ancient Hebrew mind, stones are not dead matter. The real question of this moment isn't why the crowd is shouting. It is this: why is Jesus holding them accountable for knowing the exact day? They are witnesses. When Jacob meets God in the wilderness, he sets up a stone pillar to record the encounter. When Joshua leads the Israelites across the Jordan River, he commands them to drag 12 massive stones from the riverbed and stack them on the bank, so the rocks can testify to future generations that the water stopped flowing. Stones hold memory. Stones record the covenant, the 173. 880 days of Gabriel's timeline were not just an intellectual exercise written on a parchment scroll. That countdown was hardwired into the fabric of the cosmos. The stars tracked it. The lunar cycles ticked the days away. And the Earth itself was waiting for the 10th of Nisan. 32 Ad. If the human beings failed to realize the inspector had arrived, creation would not. If the voices on the mountain were suddenly choked by fear, the limestone would crack open and take over the coronation anthem. The rocks under their sandals were fully prepared to assume the duty of the priests. The math had zeroed out. The Nagid was here. The inspection was happening. And a few days later, the stones would finally get their chance to speak. They would not cry out in joy. They would split apart in grief. When the sky turns black on Friday afternoon, and the lamb chosen on the 10th of Nisan is finally slaughtered, the Gospel of Matthew records that the earth shakes violently. Most people read this story and think Jesus is simply sad that his people are spiritually blind. But he is not diagnosing a general lack of faith. And the rocks are split in two. But before the sky goes dark, the timeline of Gabriel leaves us with a final, staggering reality. An old man fasts in a quiet room in Babylon, and an angel hands him a stopwatch. A cupbearer stands trembling on a cold marble floor, and a royal decree sets the clock in motion. Empires rise and turn to ash over 483 years, and the math holds perfectly still. Fathers inspect sheep in their pens on the 10th of Nisan, and God walks his own lamb down the mountain. A crowd paves a dirt road with crushed palm branches, and a king weeps over a city that missed the deadline. Religious leaders demand silence to protect their fragile peace, and the white limestone rocks prepare to sing. The exact hour of the divine visitation arrives, and the fabric of the cosmos is split in two. Same timeline, same God, but maybe the part that stays with me most is the tears. Not the staggering perfection of the math, not the 173, 880 days. The loud, convulsive sobbing of a commander looking down at the golden roof of a city. He is pointing to a specific, catastrophic failure of calculation. The tears on the Mount of Olives are not tears of generic religious sorrow. That was too busy surviving to realize the inspector had arrived. He did not bring fire to burn them for missing the date. He brought tears. He stood on the edge of the city and wept over the exact people who were about to nail him to the wood, mourning the peace they could have had if they had only paid attention. If you are in a season where the noise is deafening, if you are standing in the chalky dust of a life that feels out of control, obsessing over the timeline you want God to follow, demanding that he fix the empire pressing down on you, you do not need to manage the optics. You do not need a louder revolution. You just need to look at who is actually riding down the mountain. The episcope is not a threat to destroy you. It is the arrival of a king who wants to heal the very places you are trying to hide. And may the God who counts every day, every tear, and every stone walk with you through the heavy noise of your own life, and open your eyes to the visitation happening right in front of you. If this reached something in you, subscribe. Leave a comment, even one word helps. Share this with someone who is waiting for God to show up and feels like he is late. Pray for us as we keep digging into these texts. They are the tears of a man who arrived exactly on time, only to find no one checking the clock. A young donkey steps carefully over woven cloaks thrown onto the path. The air smells of spring dust, crushed leaves. The answer changes how you read every event of the Passion Week. Palm Sunday is not a spontaneous celebration. It is the execution of a mathematical certainty. To feel the weight of what is happening on this dirt road, you cannot start in the 1st century. You cannot start with the Roman guards watching from the fortress, or the Pharisees panic-stricken in the crowds. You have to leave the sunlight of Jerusalem entirely. You have to travel back more than 500 years, across the desert, to a man fasting in a quiet room in Babylon, a man who was handed a timeline that was never meant to be a secret. The year is roughly 538 BC. Babylon has fallen. The Jewish people are still in exile. An old man sits in a dry, sun-baked room over a scroll of the prophet Jeremiah, tracing the fading Hebrew letters with a wrinkled finger. He is doing the math. Daniel realizes the 70-year sentence of his people is expiring, so he fasts. He puts on sackcloth, sits in the dust, and prays. He expects comfort. He expects a generic promise of deliverance. What he gets is a stopwatch. The angel Gabriel arrives, interrupting the prayer, with a message that remains one of the most staggering pieces of chronological literature in the ancient world, and the heat of thousands of people pressing in from every side. You can hear the chanting rolling down the hill. You will find it in Daniel chapter 9. Starting in verse 24. Gabriel lays out a period of 77s decreed for the Jewish people. But it is verse 25 that acts as the starting gun for the most critical countdown in human history. Gabriel says, "Know and understand this. From the going forth of the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks." Look closely at the title given to the arriving figure. The English text usually reads Messiah the Prince. The Hebrew is Mashiach Nagid. Mashiach means the anointed one, the one smeared with holy oil for a sacred task, but Nagid carries a sharper, heavier edge. It appears throughout the Old Testament to describe a captain, a commander, the absolute head of an enterprise. When David is appointed to lead Israel's armies, he is called Nagid. When a man is placed in charge of the entire temple treasury, he is the Nagid. This is not a gentle teacher wandering out of the desert. It is a sovereign arriving to inspect his domain. And Gabriel hands Daniel the exact schedule of his arrival. 7 sevens and 62 sevens. 69 weeks of years. That is, 483 years on the prophetic calendar used by the ancient Babylonians and Israelites, which operated on a 360-day year. 12 months of 30 days. Thick and desperate. Echoing off the eastern wall of Jerusalem. Hosanna. Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. If you multiply 483 years by 360 days, you get a number that will echo through the centuries. 880 days. Gabriel tells Daniel exactly how much time will pass. But a stopwatch is utterly useless without a starting line. You cannot count down to a specific day unless you know exactly when the clock begins to tick. Gabriel provided that. 2. The countdown would trigger the moment a very specific command was issued, a royal decree to restore and build Jerusalem. Not a decree to rebuild the temple. That had already happened under Cyrus. The trigger was a decree to rebuild the city itself, the streets, the walls, the defensive perimeter. The prophecy is not a spiritual metaphor. It is a chronological map. Gabriel delivered the map and vanished. Daniel recorded the numbers, rolled up the scroll, and died. For nearly a century, the clock sat frozen. The Jewish people waited. The scroll was copied and passed down, the ink resting on the parchment, holding a cosmic tension. The stopwatch was wound. It just needed a king to press the button. The year is 445 BC. The air in the winter palace of Susa is heavy with the scent of spiced wine and burning cedar. It looks like a spontaneous parade. It looks like a peasant movement finally boiling over into revolution. The floor is cold, polished marble. A Jewish cupbearer named Nehemiah stands before Artaxerxes, the most powerful man on the planet, holding a golden goblet. His hands are trembling. In the Persian court, sadness is a crime. To look distressed in the presence of the king is an insult to his glory, a treason punishable by sudden execution. Nehemiah knows this, but the city of his ancestors lies in ash. The walls of Jerusalem are broken down. The gates are charred black by fire. He cannot hide the grief sitting heavy in his chest. And the king notices the shadow on his face. Why is your face sad? Seeing you are not sick? The question hangs in the silence of the massive hall. You can hear the sudden stillness of the guards. Nehemiah fires a silent, frantic prayer into the heavens. And then he speaks. He asks the king for the impossible. He asks for a royal decree to return to Judah, not to visit the ruins, not to sweep the ashes. He asks for letters and timber, to rebuild the city itself, to reconstruct the walls, to raise the gates, to turn an ancient graveyard back into a fortress. Artaxerxes looks at the cupbearer. The king nods. The letters are drafted. This is not a generic diplomatic memo. It is the trigger Gabriel promised. The decree is issued in the Hebrew month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes. By tracing the Persian royal calendars and the astronomical, most people assume Palm Sunday is exactly that, a sudden, organic outburst of emotion from a crowd that has simply had enough of Roman occupation. Phases of the moon. Historians can pinpoint this exact mandate. The date corresponds to March 14. 445. The ink sinks into the parchment. The hot wax is melted onto the scroll. The royal signet ring presses into the seal. A decree to restore and build Jerusalem. The stopwatch clicks. The sand begins to fall. For 483 prophetic years, the clock ticks in the background of human history. It does not pause for human suffering. It does not speed up for human impatience. Empires rise and shatter into dust, and the clock ticks. Alexander the Great sweeps his armies across the known world, and the clock ticks. Rome marches in with iron boots, planting its imperial eagles over the region, and the clock ticks. The timeline is not a secret hidden in the heavens. It is written on a scroll, sitting in the synagogues, available to any priest, scribe, or Pharisee who cares to open the text and do the math. The formula is public. The starting date is a matter of historical record. The number of days is absolute, but the detail that changes everything is what happens. When you count exactly 173, 880 days forward from that cold marble room in Persia. Let's do the math. When you take the ancient prophetic calendar of 360 days per year and translate it into our modern solar calendar, they assume Jesus is finally letting his followers celebrate him. A brief moment of earthly glory before the dark events of Friday take over. You have to account for leap years, the fractional drag of the Earth's orbit, and the transition across the BC, AD line. In the late 19th century, a British investigator at Scotland Yard named Sir Robert Anderson decided to test Gabriel's timeline. He sat down with astronomers from the Royal Observatory. They opened the dusty ledgers of historical lunar cycles. They cross-referenced the Persian royal records. They calculated the exact number of days from March 14. 445 BC. They counted the 476 solar years down to the day, knowing there is no year zero in the historical record. They added the 116 leap days. They added the remaining 24 days to reach the spring of the target year. 880 days. If you start Gabriel's clock in the Winter Palace of Susa and run it forward exactly 173, 880 days. The timeline does not land on a random decade. It does not point to a general century. It lands on April 6, 32 AD. This is not a rough estimate of a prophetic season. It is a mathematical bullseye. If realizing the Bible is not just a collection of ancient moral stories, but an integrated, hyper-precise chronometer is stirring something inside you, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the architecture. But if you look closer at the center of the procession, the scene fractures. The man on the donkey reaches the crest of the hill of the text than you knew was possible. So, the math lands on April 6, 32 AD, and on the Jewish calendar, this specific date aligns with the 10th day of the Hebrew month of Nisan, across the nation. This is the exact day. Fathers are mandated by the Book of Exodus to walk out to their pens and select a lamb for the Passover sacrifice. They run their rough hands over the wool, checking the animal for blemishes under the hot spring sun. The air is thick with the smell of dust and animals as thousands of lambs are set apart for the slaughter. For 3 years of public ministry, Jesus has strictly avoided this kind of exposure. He operated under a self-imposed gag order, When crowds tried to make him king by force, he slipped away into the mountains. When he healed lepers or opened blind eyes, he gave them strict orders to keep their mouths shut. He repeatedly told his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, "My hour has not yet come." He was operating on a hidden, invisible schedule, refusing to step onto the stage one day early. But on the exact day Gabriel's countdown expires, the gag order is lifted. Jesus sends 2 disciples to fetch an unridden colt. The entire city of Jerusalem spreads out below him, the white marble and gold of the temple gleaming in the midday sun. But the detail that makes this final puzzle piece lock together is the ancient prophecy hiding inside that choice of animal, 500 years earlier. Another prophet wrote a script. His name is Zechariah. He wrote chapter 9, verse 9, "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion, see, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." It is April Shas, 32 ad, the 173, 880th day, the 10th of Nisan. All across the hills of Judea, fathers are walking into their pens. They are pulling lambs from their flocks. They are running their hands over the wool. They are looking for blemishes. They are preparing for the Passover slaughter. And just outside the city walls, God is presenting his own lamb for inspection. Jesus steps into the sunlight. He does not hide. He does not retreat to the mountains. He does not tell the crowd to be quiet. He lays his hands on the rough hair of the unridden colt. He climbs onto its back. He begins the steep, rocky descent down the Mount of Olives. The crowd erupts. They rip branches from the palm trees. They throw them onto the dirt. They strip off their heavy woven cloaks. They pave the road with their own garments. The smell of crushed green leaves rises in the spring heat. The dust thickens the air, coating their skin and sandals.